Welcome to the Tailoring Talk Show with me, your host, Roberto Revilla. I'm a bespoke tailor, menswear designer, and owner of Roberto Revilla London Suit and Shirt Makers. This is the podcast where you drop in for the threads, but often leave with something quite unexpected. I talk to self-starters and creators about their journeys, the highs and lows, and the lessons they've learned along the way. If you haven't already, please support the show by subscribing. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please help me out by leaving a rating and a review. Today, my special guest joins us all the way from Israel. She's worked in the tech industry for over 20 years as a software engineer, engineering manager, and director of engineering. She knows firsthand what it's like to be a woman in a male-dominated field. And after spending 9 years living in the USA, she returned to her home country and decided to focus on her passion for supporting women's career growth in tech and helping them to break the glass ceiling. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Limor Bergman to the Tailoring Talk Show. Limor, how are you?
Hi, thank you so much, Roberto, for having me. I'm great. How are you?
I'm really good, thank you. I had a much longer intro written for you originally. You're so talented. There is so many things that you've done and so much that you can speak to. I just had real trouble kind of condensing it down. But I hope at least I didn't get any of that wrong.
Yeah, thank you so much for all the compliments. I'll come every day.
Brilliant. How long have you been back in Israel now?
It's been 2.5 years since we got back here. We got back in December 2019.
And whereabouts in the States were you?
We lived in Denver, Colorado for 6.5 years, and then we moved to North Dallas for 2.5 years.
Do you miss it at all? Or are you you happy to be home?
I do miss it both. I would say I'm happy to be home, definitely. And I also miss it. Actually, we are going to the US next week to visit friends and spend some time there with our kids. So definitely both.
Have you now transitioned completely to online coaching? So are you doing anything in person at all?
Mostly online, to be honest with you. I do more than just coaching. I do multiple things. So I consult to companies like Power to Fly, for example. It's a company I consult to. I do mostly right now business development for them. Prior to that, I created a mentorship program for women and underrepresented talent. And I work with different companies here in Israel. So sometimes I do face-to-face, but for the most part, I would say that the work is virtual.
When did you... So obviously background in engineering, very successful in the corporate world, but you must have observed so much throughout your time in corporate life. Fellow females that were kind of going through the challenges. I mean, I can think of so many examples I've heard from my own wife when she was working in the corporate environment, and not just the kind of challenges that you might face when it comes to career progression, but also generally the male kind of perspective and attitude towards women with just general sort of little day-to-day interactions and things like that. Definitely in the world of engineering, I can imagine that the ratio of women to men, there's quite a huge gap.
Yes.
Tell me about your experiences. I mean, going in, when you were sort of going through education and so on, you knew what field you wanted to go into, presumably.
Yes.
And you probably went in with your eyes open as well, knowing that you were going in a very male-dominated profession.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's correct. So when I went to school, to the university to study computer science, I would say, yeah, mostly, most of the people I studied with were men. There are very few women back then. Yeah, and I knew that it's a male-dominant field. So that was no surprise for me.
When did you decide that there was something you wanted to do outside of that field in terms of wanting to, I guess, get to where you are today, which is helping women to navigate and mentor them and so on. Where did that sort of realization start to happen, and when did the seeds of that goal? When did those originally get planted?
Yeah, I think the seed started in 2017. So I was leading engineering organization in DigitalOcean. I lived in the US back then, and I started mentoring engineering managers. And first of all, I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed helping other managers to face different challenges they were having, and especially I enjoyed helping women. And I also started in my day-to-day job. I was very passionate about women that were working in my organization, and I wanted to hire more women. So I think the seed started there.
Not quite the same, but on the podcast, one thing we realized that it's funny because I'm so glad that I've got you on for this season, because I decided at the end of last season, which was season 4, that after some sort of 40 odd episodes, the podcast had become very male dominated. And it honestly was not by design. Like, I had so many females that I had approached to be on the podcast. I think a lot of them, for some reason, didn't get it. They thought it was about men's tailoring, and it's kind of like, what am I going to talk about? So that was all my fault. Basically, I'd done a very bad job of selling it. But then I decided that this season was going to be female dominated, and I've already spoken to some amazing female entrepreneurs. And so what I would really, really like to do is also get some of your help for them, some of your expertise in terms of personal branding. And I know LinkedIn is something that you're very good at as well.
Yeah.
But hopefully we can kind of come on to that as well. I guess what I really want to try and get to, if I can give you an example. So my wife worked in the corporate world. She's an accountant, and she's worked in some really large organizations over here in the UK. Some of the barriers that were thrown in front of her in terms of career progression, because she's a very determined, strong-willed individual who knows her worth, she was able to break through some of those, but then she was always finding at every single employer she was with that there was inevitably some sort of ceiling that she would be butting her head against and couldn't get through. And the only way to get around that was then to go and find another position somewhere else and kind of circumnavigate that glass ceiling, move to the next level at a different company, start to climb again, but inevitably another ceiling would come. So that was the kind of, I guess, the first challenging track as a female in a male-dominated world that she experienced. The second thing was general sexism. The stupid comments from male colleagues. I remember a particular incident. She got home, she was quite upset, and she just had wires put in, braces. At work that day, one of her colleagues had basically made a very rude, quite sexist comment about the fact that she had wires in her mouth. I think you can join the dots. That in itself, as disgusting as it was, I think wasn't quite the biggest challenge in that situation. I think an even bigger challenge was that she felt that there was no point in her complaining to any superiors because it wasn't going to go anywhere. She would get laughed off and there was nothing that she could do about it. Is that something that those sorts of situations, things that you kind of experience in your time in engineering to a greater or lesser degree? How would you suggest people deal with those situations? Because it can be quite challenging and it can be quite lonely as well when you really feel like there's nowhere you can go, because what's the point?
Yeah. So I don't have a specific example where someone was sexist towards me, but for the most part, I felt lonely in a sense that I was the only woman or one of very few women. And I think that by itself just creates some bias that is unconscious most of the time. And the kind of conversations that happen, a lot of time you feel excluded, because when you're part of a male group, then they will start talking about sports or stuff that you don't really find very interesting, and that makes you feel a little bit outsider. Also, another problem is not having enough role models, right? I mean, if I'm at a certain company and all the executive roles are filled by men, which for the most part that was the case, then you feel, okay, is there even a chance for me to get somewhere to one of those roles? I can name two examples where I felt really mistreated, I would say. One example was that it actually happened after the fact. So I was almost not hired to one company. I don't want to mention the name, but
No, of course.
I was learned in hindsight that I was not always almost not hired for the position, and the hiring manager insisted to hire me, but other people in the group thought that I was not charismatic enough. And I don't know what they meant by charismatic and what exactly they expected me to be. I also had a very hard time in that company to get promoted. And again, similar group were biased. They thought that I'm not a fit for the next level without really knowing me that well. They didn't really have much interaction with me on the day-to-day. And maybe that was one of the challenges. So it kind of goes to you're asking, okay, what can we do? So maybe one of the things that I should have done better is try to find opportunities to have those people know me a little bit better, both on the personal level and also professionally, so they can feel more comfortable. Again, my manager come to the rescue, but not always you have a manager that is willing to fight for you and is really, willing to go against other people that are very powerful and they have, usually above them, managing them and fight for you. It's not always the case. And then you find yourself in a situation that you have to basically leave. Otherwise, you'll not go anywhere.
It breaks my heart when I hear stories like that. I mean, nowadays diversity is very, top of the subject list when, you hear people talking and that word is thrown around so much, sometimes to the point where it can actually become quite patronizing because people are doing it because it's kind of the trendy thing. When you actually look underneath the surface of an organization, not much is being changed at all. From your point of view and in the work that you're doing with a lot of the corporate businesses that you consult with, what can management teams do to really affect meaningful change when it comes to diversity and inclusion?
So first of all, have a diverse workforce. I think it start there, right? If everyone looks the same and come from the same background, it's very difficult. And by the way, I even notice interesting things. It's not just about the gender. In one of the companies I work with, a lot of people, you know how it is that companies like referrals. So in one company, there were a lot of people that brought one another from a previous company they worked at. And that created also a very challenging situation. It was like this group of people that came from another company and other people felt excluded. So it can also come in other variations, not just on the gender based. So you want to make sure when you hire that you have people, not just gender, by the way, but people from different backgrounds, different communities or sub-communities, also gender diversity, age diversity. Because when you have a diverse group of people, it's usually just by nature helps people feel a sense of belonging.
It's reducing the them and us or creating the them and us kind of vibe or culture, isn't it? I remember when I worked at an IT company years and years ago, I think the original directors sold out. The new directors came in, but they brought teams with them. And it was exactly what you just described. Suddenly these new people came in. And we'd obviously over the years had new people come into the business before. This was different. We'd not experienced anything like this because this team of like 5 or 6 guys and 1 girl came in, but they immediately were sat in a different part of the office that we didn't feel like we could really sort of go into. And initially, I mean, it was okay in the end after a few months. It turned out that they weren't the horrible people we thought they were, and we were able to build relationships with them and so on. But initially, the first few months was very, very difficult because it was very much a them and us. I'm very fortunate to work with a lot of C-suite level people, but when you get companies that merge, I think there's a lot of room for growth in the way that businesses manage that, because the number of them and us stories that I hear when that happens, you have one business that merges with another and the cultures are very different. And so the people on one side get very suspicious of the people on the other side and so on. And so then that becomes a bit of a management headache. Do you ever get involved in helping to coach businesses through those sorts of transitions as well?
I didn't have the chance specifically to coach on those transitions, but definitely, acquisitions is a good example, right? When you acquire a company, and it happened to me, and that I was part of an acquisition. So you feel that you still in your own group, and how do you start getting acclimated to the new organization? So I haven't specifically coached on this situation, but I've been in those situations myself.
Oh God, there's so much I want to ask you. I want to ask you about remote working as well, because we're just about to take on our first remote worker. And one thing that I'm very passionate about, but also I'm very worried about, and I know that a lot of other business owners are going through the same sort of thing, is that I want everybody to feel part of what we're doing, but I'm really worried that distance is going to create detachment, and I'm really struggling to get my head around how I can make that person feel part of everything as much as possible. Help.
Yeah, so first of all, it's very challenging when everyone, I don't know your situation, but if I understand correctly, everyone is co-located and you want to hire one person remote. So the situation initially is very problematic because you have only one person remote and the rest are in the same office. So you have to really make sure people understand that they need to make an extra effort to make this person feel part of the team, which means that communication can be done via tools like Slack or Microsoft Teams or whatever tool that you choose to use. Meetings are always done also virtually, even if some people are in the same office, but they are done virtually. I've worked in situations that actually people that even sat in the same company, in the same location, join each one of them from a different room. So everyone feels like, oh, we are all virtual. Because you don't want that person to feel like they are left out. You don't want that person to feel like, oh, if I'm not in the office, I'm missing a lot of the information that is going there. And I felt that, many years ago when I was working at a company that I was in a satellite office to the headquarters, and we always felt, and it was way before all the online video and all those tools, were using conference calling, just voice. And the problem was that people just after the meeting stepped out of a room and started talking and making decisions. So you want to be very careful about what happens in the corridors or between meetings or whatever, and how people really adjust their communication style to the fact that there is someone that is not there and need to be part of some of the discussions.
Yeah. What you said there was just, it's so true. Funny enough, this morning I was on a Zoom call. You have that moment where the video's blank and then it pops up. And it was me, and on the other side of the call were 3 people sat together on the same desk in the same room. And I suddenly felt, I said to them, I feel like I've turned up to a tennis match that I thought was going to be a singles match. But it's not even that I'm playing doubles, I'm playing triples, and I'm just totally don't feel kind of prepared for this. So I love what you said about, if you're having a group meeting and all of you are in the same place, but each person going to a different room. I think that's so cool. And actually joining the call separately from each role. That is it's so simple, but you don't realize the impact that it can have.
Mm-hmm. It can make a huge difference. Yeah, and make sure that communication between meetings is done. You need to make extra effort to document things, to communicate via different tools or documents, sharing information online. You need to make an extra effort for that, because you have someone that is not there, that you cannot just walk to and talk to in the corridors, or
Yeah, it's finding ways to really. I'm going to get another podcast that I'm involved with. We very rarely get to see each other in person, but it feels like I'm never away from them because we have a Discord chat. We used to be on Slack, so it's the same thing, right?
Yeah.
But
Discord, whatever tool you like, that doesn't matter.
Yeah, brilliant. No, thank you for that. When it comes to, sort of personal branding and so on, LinkedIn is now becoming pretty much the platform of choice when people want to put themselves out there. I recorded an amazing episode a couple of weeks ago. Zamha Desai, she runs a group called Recommend Asian and another group called Professional Asian. Recommend Asian is basically for female founders, giving them the platform to be able to network together, recommend each other, giving them the help and support they need if they're looking to get out of the corporate environment, start their own businesses, personal help in their personal lives and so on as well. Obviously, if they're getting out of the corporate workspace and having to sort of rebrand themselves, whether they're looking to go somewhere else or they're looking to start their own thing, I always say to anyone who's going through that process that I tell them that LinkedIn is going to be such an important part of that. But where do they start with LinkedIn and building that personal brand and building their profile and so on so that they can give the maximum impact online when they're trying to sell themselves out there?
I think it's a constant effort. So most people go to LinkedIn when they need something. So if you're an employee, when they want to switch to a new job, or if you're a business owner, when you need to contact some business, clients or whatever. And the thing is that it's best to utilize the tool actually where you don't need, and I'll take the example of job seekers where you don't need a job, because you want to build a brand that sustains over time, that people knows you and know who you are and understand your skills, and you want to be personable. I mean, although LinkedIn is a professional network, we're still people, and the value of personal connection is so important. So don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Obviously, professionally, I will not go do something crazy, but be yourself. Share who you are, what you're passionate about. Share about the things you're doing, and be just consistent and be there constantly, not just when you need something. One of the worst things you can do, and this is I'm wearing the hat of a business owner. Think about how many times people contact you, they send you a connection request, and immediately after they send you some message, hey, this and this, my company does XYZ, can we schedule a call? And there is nothing that irritates me more than that. So, because you have to build a relationship with someone before you can sell them something. You cannot just go immediately and sell. That will turn people off. And I'll tell you that a lot of times when I'm on LinkedIn, and I'll be honest, it comes and goes. Sometimes I don't have enough time to go there, but I sometimes think, I'm just broadcasting things and no one listens. But people do listen. People do read what I write, and I can sometimes be contacted, say, I really follow what you're doing. So you sometimes don't realize the significance of what you're doing. But people, if you're consistent and you put things out there, people will read it and will care about this and about you. And then if you contact someone and they feel like they know you, even if they don't really know you, but they feel like they know you because you gave them some value, they will be more likely to help you.
It's so true. I mean, even literally just before we jumped on the call, I was just having a really, really quick look on LinkedIn because I'd received a message from somebody that I actually do know. But then I had another 12 messages from people that, I don't know, they were just messaging me basically, hey, Roberto, I saw whatever. And I'm like, that's got nothing to do with anything that I do. And then straight into their sales pitch. And then giving me their Calendly link to schedule a call. I'm thinking, I don't even know you. Like, who the heck is this? I don't have a like exactly what you said. I don't have a relationship with you, so why the hell am I going to give you any of my time? This is crazy. And so what happens, you hit the delete button. But then there are other people that I do follow that do post regular, very high value content. And at some point I reach out to them. And sometimes they'll reach out to me after a while. But then if I do feel like I've got that connection with them and I know what they're about, and I feel, at least if they've approached me, that they've done their homework and their research and they know what I'm about, then it becomes a lot more meaningful.
Yeah, and there's nothing bad about selling yourself. We sell ourselves every day. But I think that it's much more powerful when you just sell yourself by providing value to others. Just be there and provide value. And then people will want to connect with you and work with you. If you reach out to someone and say, hey, do you know anyone I can help with? I can help, or just ask, hey, if you know some people who are looking for, then people who follow you and see the value will help you.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of helping others, in terms of what you do, what's the perfect client for you? Because I know you obviously enjoy working with larger organizations, but I'm guessing what really gets you going is when you're working with individuals. But what's the perfect client for you?
So the absolute perfect client, my sweet spot, where I enjoy the most, is working with a woman who is, let's say, in mid-career, in software development, engineering manager, or maybe starting a director of engineering role, and she needs some support with confidence, with figuring out what to do and how to progress in her career. That's absolutely my passion and what I feel like also I bring the most value.
Right. I love how specific that was. Like I could draw that person right now.
Yeah, she also has a name. I called her Gina. I imagined, right? I like to imagine things, right? When you imagine something yourself. So I imagined Gina, who she is, how old she is, what she's doing, what she needs. And that's my ideal person to work with. But I do work with others too. I work with founders, I work with men too, and I work with women in other, not just in software, and I work with women at the beginning of their career also. So it really varies. But there I feel there's like, based on experience, I feel like there are certain individuals that I feel like I bring the most value for.
Yeah. If anyone's listening, if any of my female founders are listening to this and are thinking, I'm not a software engineer, I'm not an engineer, I'm not a developer, programmer, whatever, that's not going to be me. The principles are the same, right, across industries and so on. So don't be put off.
Yeah, the principles are the same. And that's why also I went and invested time in doing coaching certification, because it was important for me to get the tools and be able to help others with some, a more broad range and not just specifically in the area that I was working at.
Yeah. So before we finish off, Limor, I've got to ask you actually, because you're my first guest from Israel. So thank you,
cool.
First of all. Oh yeah, it's so exciting. Yeah. How's the weather out there at the moment?
Compared to UK, it's actually nice.
Hey, we just had on Tuesday 42 degrees nearly.
I know. I watch the news, and here they like to talk about what's going on in the world. I mean, they do it everywhere, but in Israel, like people watch a lot of news in general, and they're showing like what's going on in the UK. And I felt, wow, Israel actually is not that bad. So the temperatures are in around 30 degrees, but it's pretty humid. And the good thing is that in Israel, you have AC everywhere. So the AC here at our place is working 24/7 for a few months a year.
Yeah. I've heard about all of your lovely air-conditioned homes and apartments in Israel. We live in Golders Green, so, a few of my clients do have second homes in Israel. Well, I guess their first homes were in Israel and they're in London. But I'm always so jealous when they tell me that they're going back to Israel for the summer or whatever. For me, it's been lovely over here. The problem I think over here is that British people will spend thousands of pounds to go abroad to get the kind of weather that we're having at the moment. But as soon as we get the weather that we're having at the moment, everybody complains.
Yeah, because you're not, again, I mean, based on what I see and hear, you're not set up for heat waves like that. And unfortunately, that's what happens with global warming. And some countries are more occupied to cold weather than to hot. I can tell you that in Israel, if there will be like an extreme cold, we're completely not set for that.
Yeah.
The houses doesn't have any central heating for the most part. So if something like that happens, I remember when I used to live in Texas, we came from Colorado. So we were used to the snow. And then in Texas, there was one day snow and everyone freaked out. They didn't know what to do with it. So it's all about how the country is set for specific weather.
I've got to bring some tailoring talk in here at some point. So when it gets hot over here, what happens is the ladies generally always dress reasonably well, I think. So, you know, nice lightweight summer dresses come out, all that sort of thing. The guys, on the other hand, have this habit of just stripping off. You know, it doesn't matter what they look like as well, right? But the tops just, as soon as the temperature goes above 20 degrees, the tops come off. And they look awful.
What, in the street?
In the street, in the city.
Oh my goodness.
At the beach is fine. I totally get it. But, I mean, they dress like they're at the beach, but in the centre of London, in the big city. What is it like over there? Is it a bit more classy?
So I don't know if to call it classy, but people usually don't just take their shirt off in the middle of the street. The kind of, I mean, it's very, very casual here in Israel. Unless you are an attorney working in a law firm or an accountant, those kind of professions, or a banker, most people wear very, very casually. And during the summer, men just wear like short pants, short shirt, or, you know, even a tank top and flip-flops or whatever. I mean, so that's kind of how it looks like for the most part. Sometimes you do see in the parks or so some men taking their shirt off because they want to show off their body. I don't have any problem with that because typically they do have nice bodies, so that's fine.
Yeah,
I saw yesterday, I was driving back home and there was a guy, he was very, you know, his body was really nice and he was like taking his shirt off and running, and I said, oh, okay, that's nice. I don't have a problem with that.
Hey, you know, even us, like in the parks here, like, because I cycle quite a lot, and sometimes we'll be out training and we'll see some guy sort of with his top off and an 8-pack and all of that, you know, sort of running past, and we just look at each other and we just nod. We're just like, do you know what? Fair enough. Like, fair enough. He puts the work in.
You work hard for that body, so that's okay to show off a little bit.
Exactly. And it's weather appropriate to do that. But then you see a lot of other people, which is the majority, unfortunately, over here. You wouldn't be so happy, basically. Yeah. You know, you kind of look at them and no one can see this, but I'm covering my eyes at the moment. It's awful.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, overweight and you know, is unfortunately getting more and more and more common across the world because we eat a lot of junk in general and we don't move our bodies.
Yeah, my wife has a hard time with it because she's Mediterranean as well. So, you know, she's used to seeing more what you see on a daily basis, not, you know, what we have over here. Anyway, sorry. I'm sorry I took you down that little...
No.
You know,
we have this. I mean, we have a lot of problem here in Israel with people that are overweight. Usually, they don't just take their shirt off in the middle of the street. But yes, we do have that problem too. It's not like everyone here is super fit.
Yeah. But it's really weird because I wouldn't have thought that, generally speaking, Israelis had an obesity problem, because we always think of you guys as being a lot healthier, of having much better access to good, fresh food than we have over here. Because that's the problem over here. Like, the cheapest food that people have access to here is the unhealthiest. And all of the good stuff, like if you wanted to live a truly Mediterranean diet over here, which I think a lot of studies have shown is probably the best way for a lot of people to live, I mean, God knows, you look at a lot of my tailors in the workroom, like, I mean, some of them must be over 100 years old, but it's all the olive oil and stuff that they eat. But that stuff is so expensive. So what happens is half the population avoids it and they just go for the processed junk. So I'm quite surprised to hear that you have that issue kind of looming in Israel as well.
Yeah, because first of all, yes, junk is still cheaper than buying produce, although I think in general produce here is relatively accessible in Israel. I'm not saying it's cheap because prices go up everywhere, but it's definitely more accessible here, and people are more used to eating vegetables and fruit than maybe in other countries. But still, people eat a lot of junk, and they like to eat a lot of processed foods, and we have more access to it, and it's cheap and easy, so definitely.
Again, I apologize for taking you off the path. That's absolutely fascinating, actually. Limor, thank you so much. Where can people find you online?
Yeah, so they can find me on LinkedIn, and I can send you the link. It's Limor Bergman, basically, and they can find me on my website and other social media, but I think LinkedIn is probably the best, and I'll definitely be happy to share that with you.
I will definitely put all of your links in the show notes so people can find you. And if there are any Ginas out there listening, it was Gina, right?
Gina, yeah.
Yes. Then do get in touch. And even if you're not a Gina, even if you're in a different field, then you can still get in touch with Limor. She's not going to dismiss you just because you don't fit the Gina criteria. Limor, thank you so much. Have you had fun?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Roberto. It was a real pleasure.
It's been an absolute pleasure. I feel like I will need to get you on again. And, for the listeners at home, she's kind of stepped in at the last minute. We had this organized for a little while, but with all my guests, I'll always send some kind of pre-show notes and we'll have a pre-call and so on. But unfortunately, Carolina was in hospital this week. And so I wasn't able to do that. So poor Limor, didn't get anything from me, didn't know that she was going to be on the call today. So for you to have joined so abruptly without that preparation, thank you so much. You've been absolutely wonderful, really.
Yeah, and I'm sorry for that. And I wish Carolina all the health, best health, and to you too. Just health, right? That's what we need.
Exactly. Like my mother always used to say, if you don't have your health, you have nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you
Brilliant.
So much for having me.
Thank you all so much for joining Limor and I on this episode. Don't forget that Tailoring Talk is now on Instagram at Tailoring Talk Podcast. And I love feedback, so you can also email the show directly at tailoringtalkpodcast@gmail.com. Please remember to subscribe, rate and review. You can also click the share button in your player to send the show on to people you know. If you're enjoying Tailoring Talk and feel compelled to throw some change our way and support the show, you can now buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com /Roberto Revilla. Have a great week and I'll see you on the next one.